Thank you.
Ms. Kelsey.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kelsey Erickson-Streufert. I'm the Chief Public Affairs Officer for the Texas Restaurant Association. I've been trying to come up with a good soup to nuts joke as the food witness, but I can't say I've come up with much, so I'll have to get back to Representative Raymond on that one. The Texas Restaurant Association represents the state's over 56,000 restaurants across the state. We employ over 1.4 million Texans. Our members include everything from the single unit food truck or mom and pop restaurant you love to McDonald's, Brinker, everything in between. As you probably know from your own districts, restaurants are a critical force in our state's economy. We've actually become the state's largest private sector employer. And for every $1 spent in a Texas restaurant, we generate $2.35 to the state's economy. At the same time, over 90% of restaurants have fewer than 50 employees, so we're very much the quintessential small business. And the high labor demands mean we run on very narrow profits, even in good economic times, and we're all waiting for those good economic times to return. All of this plays a factor into the way that property taxes impact our businesses and ultimately our communities. So to keep this testimony solutions oriented, I just have 4 main points I want to kind of briefly touch on. First, my friend at Tatara really touched on this already, but please continue to strive for balance between the tax burden on businesses and residences. Before last session's tax relief bill passed, businesses paid nearly 60% of the total state and local tax burden in Texas. So when we talk about, Texas being a low tax state, that doesn't always hold true for our businesses. And that burden really hits our small businesses like restaurants the hardest. I actually had some Tatara data in here about, and we didn't plan that, about the tax relief package last year, 86% of that going to single family residences, only 14% going to all of the other property, including businesses. Many of you, I know, fought very hard for compression to be part of that package, so thank you. That's really why that wasn't even more tilted. And so our message today on that point is really just please continue that fight. Please continue to look at how we create equity so that Texas is not only an affordable place to live, but it's also an affordable place to do business, which is how we really keep the engine of our economy going. Second is the circuit breaker. Another thank you here. Thank you for including that. We know it's not perfect, but there are a lot of businesses who are going to benefit from it. And to get, a market rate over 20% year over year can be really devastating for a small business like a restaurant. We'd, of course, love to see that provision extended. We would love for the legislature to consider lowering that number. Your average restaurant profit margin is 3 to 5%. So you can imagine if your value goes up 15% year over year, it's only a matter of time before you're priced out of that land and you essentially have to move. Third is land values versus current use. This is a sort of more consistent theme I'm hearing from our members is when they get a property tax appraisal, the land value is just skyrocketing because of what could be on that land versus what is on that land. Just think about properties around UT Austin or here around the Capitol or in East Austin. Those properties could be a 20-floor condo building or office building or parking garage, and that obviously is way more valuable than a single-story restaurant that's making 5%. And so very quickly that becomes a situation where that restaurant is basically priced out of the dirt that they are on and they have to move on. So we would love to work with y'all on some kind of solution to that because it really is hurting a lot of the beloved sort of restaurants and other businesses in our community. And then lastly is appraisal protests, which we've talked about a lot today. Another piece of feedback we get from our members is that they have to protest their appraisals every single year for every single property just to protect themselves. We understand that's part of the process, but obviously that creates a cost for our small businesses as well. The protest process for commercial property is a lot more complicated than for residential, so they pretty much always hire someone to handle that for them. And again, that's another expense that they're bearing. One of my members in San Antonio has about 25 restaurants across the state. She sent me her list of protests this year. In every single one, I think she got a decrease through the protest process. In some, she shaved $100,000 to $200,000 off the value of, say, a $500,000 property. So that's a significant cost that she is saving, but she's having to go through the protest process in order to realize those savings. So I think just anything that we can do to make that protest process more transparent, more straightforward, common language instructions. My members had some good ideas about that. For example, one recommended that early in the communications process, we let people know not only do you have the right to receive the evidence of how we appraised your property, but if you don't receive it by X date, call us. Because what happens is sometimes that gets lost in the mail, people don't know they're entitled to it, so they show up at their protests, they're wholly unprepared. It was sort of a waste of everyone's time, right? And so just really explaining that process early on, being transparent about it, can be a big help. Similarly, a member had an idea about earlier disclosure on how a commercial property is appraised. There's different methods that the appraisal district can use, and they do disclose that, but the earlier you know that, the more you can be sort of prepared in advance for your protest hearing. So lastly, just want to say thank you again for having me here today and for the many years of work that has gone into improving our property tax system. There's no doubt that the reforms from last year have made a positive impact, and we're hopeful that we can kind of keep working on some of these issues to make it even better. So thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Oh, Candy, you do have one. Okay. Rep. Noble.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just have a quick question about your land value versus current use. I totally get that. I live in a house that was built in '79, and they lowered the value on my home, but we're on 2 acres, so they raised the value of the acreage. So I totally get where that's coming from. Is that a decision that we made as a legislature? Is it coming from the comptroller's office, or is it a local appraisal? I mean, I don't know how to fix that, so that's why I'm asking. Do you happen to know that answer?
My understanding is it's because that is the market rate of that land, right? That's what that land is worth to people because they could redevelop it. So I think we need to look at some kind of statutory change, and I understand it's going to be a difficult balancing act because we do want a true assessment of market value, but we also know we have these historic businesses that have been around for many years, and we don't want to price them out of that land simply because development's happening around them. So I don't, sitting here today, know what that answer is, but I think it would need to be a statutory fix, and we'd be happy to work with you on brainstorming what that could look like, and maybe bringing in some experts other than me who know the system a little better.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Noble. Members, any other questions?